Half of my time is honestly just unpaid projects. I build a lot of like prototypes and little experiments, and they're always a little bit silly or a little bit goofy, so it's funny. That's what the spectacles are for me. You just plug them in with USB, you just send something, and within 3 seconds you're playing in real time while your Lens Studio is open.
Today, I'm joined by Max Van Leeuwen, a digital creator and visual effect artist known for his AR prototypes and for many viral hits on Instagram, and trust me, not by chance.
I start the edit for the Instagram video before the project is done. With this city carpet, the product really is the Instagram video. I live very strongly by the 80-20 rule. Like when a project is 80% done, it's done.
Besides looking at what Spectacle can and cannot do right now, we dive into what it means to be a creator on these emerging platforms.
A year ago right now, Meta shut down Spark AR. So that was also a bit of a wake-up call for the whole industry.
What are the implications and opportunities due to the rise of AI?
They added My AI, which creates the whole lens for you. When you really get into... That's where AI really fails at the moment.
And he shared his secrets for keeping a growing pipeline of new clients.
If I would now stop doing those, I would also stop getting new client work.
But before we get into it, I wanted to remind you that if you don't have the time to watch the full interview and want to learn from other founders and creatives at the intersection between XR and AI, you should definitely check out the XR AI Spotlight newsletter. By subscribing, you will get weekly interviews like this directly in your inbox and access to a list of tools and apps that allow you to experience Gaussian splatting in VR, on Quest, and Vision Pro. Just check the first link in the show description.
And now it's time to roll the title and welcome Max under the spotlight. Max, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
So Max, I have seen, I couldn't say hundreds, but dozens of some of your experiments around lenses with Snap, spectacles.
Yeah.
And given your experience so far, what is that today you can build on spectacles?
Yeah. So I build a lot of like prototypes and little experiments, and they're always a bit in the I always take an angle of making it a little bit silly or a little bit goofy, so it's funny, and so it's it spreads fast, but it's also something that really speaks to people if you use humor or if you make something come alive. And so I think on the spectacles right now, you can build a lot of different scene understanding type prototypes. So you can really do a 3D mesh of your environment and do something with that, or use image tracking, or like all of these different types of tracking. And so I use mostly like those kind of features to really bring something alive, to kind of bridge the gap between the real world and the virtual world, like trying to bring those close together.
This is a very good point, because we're going to discuss about some of those, like image tracking, the meshing of the environment, and also when things sometimes, I can imagine, broke a bit, because that's also one of those things.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, like among the many experiments that you have done, are there some that you're particularly proud of, and why?
Yes, absolutely. I'm still, I think, the most proud of a very silly project that I did for this city carpet, this 90s rug that a lot of people had in their childhood. It's like this toy carpet that looks like a city and it has roads on it. And when you look at it in the spectacles, there's this in the video. So when you look at it through the spectacles, you see these little cars driving around. And it's a very simple little idea, but it's just a really nice way to show like what AR could do. And there's some interaction. You can change the traffic light and they actually react to it. It's like the cars are intelligent in a sense. And it just really shows like this sort of potential for gamification in the real world and making things feel more alive, or adding an extra layer to something. So that's a project I really like.
So when you mentioned about, let's say you are proud of it, what aspect of it made it that it is, was there a technical challenge that maybe you overcome, or a final outcome that, let's say, came out better than what you expected? What aspect of this makes you say, yes, this is really what I'm most proud of?
I think with this project, it's the idea, to be honest. It's like, I just really like this sort of idea. And sometimes you just have these like little connections, like, oh, I could make something come alive. I could do this with that. And have an AR layer on top of something. And then I feel like the project is really worth doing. If it's like if it immediately strikes a chord with people when they watch it. Technically, this project wasn't even that complex. It's quite a simple setup because you just have your image marker. The whole carpet is an image tracker. And then you've got like these little cars that are autonomous. So there was some programming to, make the cars drive and not bump into each other, that sort of stuff. But that's very old school game development. Yeah.
So there is something else that you mentioned, like something that resonates with people, and I think a lot of that also has to do indeed with the idea, but the storytelling behind it. Like, how do you also package a certain idea and you share? And I think this is something that you are very good at, in a way that it is not just about making that happen, but I see that there are a lot of talented developers, and sometimes they kind of like get lost when it's about sharing what they have created.
Yeah.
So maybe that before we go into more about spectacles and all that, I was curious, like, what advice would you give, maybe practical, when it's about to other people that are creating these incredible prototypes, but sometimes they just die in the crowd or in the feed, literally.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Or even on your desktop when you're working on a project and you never finish it. Or I live very strongly by the 80-20 rule. Like when a project is 80% done, it's done. Like the last 20% takes 80% of your time. It's not going to be worth doing that. So you have to kind of fight being a perfectionist sometimes because you always want to make things better and like make it improve that little thing that no one's going to see. But then what I do to kind of force myself to actually complete a project and to also have a good post about it is I start the edit for the Instagram video before the project is done. So I already start editing like the post so that I know what I'm going to need and what I'm not going to need. And then I'm kind of like already like so far into the posting process that at some point the project itself also becomes less of a priority because I just want to post at that point. Like then the post itself is a new product. So I'm already working on a new project in that sense. So it's a little psychological step that I make so I don't get stuck in this creation process forever. Because I know how hard it is to like be a perfectionist and like never finish anything. I definitely have my own folder with unfinished stuff.
This is a very interesting point. Like in a sense, like what is the product?
Yeah, absolutely. With this city carpet, the product really is the Instagram video, which is a bit of a shame because I would have loved to share this, but then it's a very practical reason why this lens is not public. And that's that the cutout for the city mat in the factory where they're made is different for each city mat. So the image market tracking is different for everyone who buys one, even if you buy from the identical same brand. And then on top of that, there's different designs for city mats, like IKEA has one and another store has one. So there's just a lot of practical reasons that this lens doesn't really work for everyone.
So I mean, this idea of what is the product is something that I want to talk about later. Because I think that we started with the premise that we're going to help people figure out how to build what can be built, what cannot be built on Spectacle. So let's deliver on that. But then I want to get to that again later, because I think it's a very interesting point, and especially for developers, when sometimes building on this new platform, the ROI is not necessarily the product they're going to build, more like the visibility that they can get in terms of skills that they have applied, learnings that they have done on a new technology platform that can attract eyeballs. But if you don't do that, if you don't, let's say, purposefully share that findings or that process, then you're basically doing this just for yourself. That could be a good enough reason, right? I think it's a fair point. But before we get into it, right, given the current experience, what are the current limitations of the headset? And we know some, of course, FOV's limitations. We're talking about batteries. Can you give us an overview, even maybe some of the things that people might not straightforward know about?
Yeah. So indeed, there is like the well-known like hardware limitations that, it's a bit of the current version of the Spectacles is a bit of a clunky device. It's like quite big and it's got like the FOV and stuff. There is the memory, the storage space thing, but to be honest, that's not really a big problem for me. To summarize it, it's like you have 25 megabytes for the initial lens. When you publish something, when you open a project, it needs to be 25 megabytes or less. But you can download assets on runtime, which you can store on Snap's server. There's like Snap Cloud and stuff. So I've never really run into issues with that, but I do hear people say that it's a limitation sometimes to not have an infinitely large build package. I think an interesting limitation that is often overlooked is that just because of how waveguides work, in augmented reality, you've got this additive light coming through in the glasses, so you don't have the color black, for example. That's not a thing. If you render something that's black, it just becomes invisible, and that's like this. It's a bit of a classic like AR problem. It's in every AR glasses, but then when you're working with like a shader or you want to do cartoony outlines around objects, I run into that sometimes. And then I always forget, like, oh yeah, I forgot that was not, because it looks good in the editor, kind of. The editor emulates it, so it helps you, but it's still like in the glasses, sometimes you're surprised with how the colors look. There's always ways to cheat it and to make it work, but it's just one of those little differences that is fun to think about cleverly.
Now, what about, for example, other, let's say, capabilities when it comes, for example, to hand tracking or maybe mesh recognition? Where do we stand right now? What's possible? What's not possible?
Yeah, it's you've got a couple of different types of tracking. One thing that is very heavily requested, but not in the spectacles right now, is the 6DoF, just like a 3D object tracking that is moving. So when you hold, I don't know, a specific like product in your hand and you want to know where it is exactly, that is not a part of the set right now. But I've heard that is kind of in development. That's like a sort of a thing that they're working on. But apart from that, you've got very good like static mesh tracking. So you can do a 3D like a LiDAR scan on an iPhone and then upload it to Snap, and then you get like an ID number. And if you just import that into Lens Studio, the software that you make the Snap lenses with, then you get like this mesh as a trackable anchor. So you can just put anything in there. So that's something that's actually used quite a lot for things like statues, or for if you want to have a scavenger hunt in a certain street or something. There is VPS coming with Niantic. They are doing this, like Spectacles and Niantic are collaborating on that, but I haven't seen anything from that yet. So I don't know how that's going to work or if it's good. Yeah, and then you've got, of course, 3D hand tracking, and like the sort of the basic types of tracking, like the hand tracking and the image tracking and the world tracking. Those are like the three most important ones, I think.
To help people maybe understand and put in perspective, even maybe if you don't have experience, that's totally fine, but just for maybe people that might be more familiar, for example, developing on MetaQuest, right?
Yeah.
So how does that compare the mesh that you get with a Quest, maybe with the hand tracking that you get at a Quest, versus what you're getting right now on a Spectacle?
Yeah.
Can you draw a comparison?
I can for hand tracking, but not so much for other ones, because with the Quest, I'm not that experienced with the tracking stuff. But the hand tracking, I would say it is more like responsive on the Quest. The Quest is definitely more like, like immediate. But it is pretty good on the specs as well. It's like you've got like individual fingers and you get a 3D hand mesh. So it has all the same elements. I think that the Quest does have a bit more, a bit more hardware to process this stuff with.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have a brick attached to your face. Now, spectacles can be heavy, but we can still say that the form factor is a bit more friendly.
Definitely.
In a way like that. And one thing I was curious, because some of your experiments are not just indoor in a living room, right? Some of these takes the space outside, where we imagine that this kind of device is going to be worn, right? So have you noticed like some things in terms of when it's hand tracking, for example, or maybe environmental meshes that you notice when you step outside? People have said that, for example, in bright light condition, on Quest, you get very, let's say, it's more complicated to, for example, track hands or mixed reality and so on.
Yeah.
Have you also noticed something in differences between indoor and outdoor use on the spectacles?
I think outdoor generally helps with hand tracking in the sense that there's more light, assuming that it's during the day. Like indoors can be a bit, if you're in a dark room, that can be like a bad thing for tracking. So it helps if there's more light. But I do think that when you're walking and you're moving and like the background is moving behind your hand, that is kind of lowering the quality of the hand track a little bit. And that's something you wouldn't do so much indoors, of course, because there's less space. So while you're walking, I think I did this lens where you have you can draw flowers. So you can just pinch your fingers together and you can start a flower in 3D and you can make it as long as you want. And then I put a high score in there. So like a global leaderboard. So the longer you make the flower, at some point it will start telling you like, okay, your flower is 20 meters long. And then it's like, and the high score is 120 meters or something. So I was outside like a lunatic drawing the longest flower ever. And like, and then you notice like, oh, I really have to keep my hand like a bit more to the center of the field of view. Cause if it goes towards the edges or if there's like too much stuff happening in the background, like grass zooming by or something, then it might lose the tracking and then the flower has like a little interruption for one frame. So that's something to keep in mind, I think.
So are you still on top of the leaderboard?
No, someone else got the high score and I don't know who, because it's an anonymous user. So I don't know who it is.
So we discussed a bit about hand tracking, right? Another thing that I've noticed when using the spectacles is that they are paired to your phone.
Yeah.
So some of the interactions can be potentially done using the spectacle apps and what is, let's say, this trackpad. And you can imagine other use cases for this phone that is connected, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that you have explored in some way where you find this to be useful for specific use cases? I mean, what are your thoughts of coupling the hand interactions with the phone?
I haven't had any sort of projects myself where I really used it so far, but I've seen like other projects use the phone for like that famous example that Snap made with golfing, where you're like holding your phone as the golf stick and then you're just playing golf but with a physical thing in your hand. And I guess the tactical the tactile feeling of a physical thing in your hand is really nice. It's like it's good to have a controller of some sort. I think that having your phone as an input device makes a lot of sense right now because there's still so many questions about UX in AR, right? There's like so many things that we don't know how to make it intuitive in 3D, stuff like a keyboard or how do you make that in a way that it's easier in the glasses than it is right now on the phone that we all know and use every day.
There is also a point of acceptance, right? In a sense, like we imagine that then this generation that is going to reach consumers, I don't know if that's going to have hand tracking, right? We don't know yet.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you can see like being around, like waving or doing like this is not something that looks a good way to interact with digital content, right? So that's why there is this wristband, for example, from Meta, and that there is eye tracking and other systems that people are experimenting with.
Yeah.
I wonder if a phone for some of these cases, right, could be a more, even just a tap to confirm certain choices. Then the user experience is very dependent on the type of content. If it's a game, if it's a utility, or anything else. I haven't seen many examples of that, and I wonder why.
Yeah, it's I think it is still a bit the same reason that I haven't done something with it either. It's like when I think of a project in like something to make in AR, I guess I also, in a way, I would like it to not need the phone. I would like it to be AR fully. That's kind of my sort of way of thinking about it. Like it would be nice. I see it as a challenge in UX to not have to use other inputs or make it so intuitive that the user just uses their hands only. And that, I guess that's kind of the point.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think we could discuss for hours just about this interaction with the
Yeah.
on these immersive wearables, so to say. But what I was curious also about, what's your experience um, working with Lens Studio? So,
Yeah.
of course, as someone has also built Lens in the past, right? You're pretty familiar, I imagine. Are there, like, let's say, some quick ways that people can start jumping in, some templates? Imagine that just I'm a developer, right? I know a bit of Unity or some maybe some web development, but I
Yeah.
know nothing about Lens Studio. What am I gonna, let's say, face?
Yeah. I think it's like I genuinely mean this. I think Lens Studio is a really fun place to start like developing for AR or for sort of mini games, or it's this sort of like game engine zero sugar. It's like a very lightweight game engine. It feels a lot like Unity, but it's new and it doesn't have any of the bloat, and it's just like, you don't have like difficult processes for building. You just push it to your phone and you immediately can start playing around with it. And it's just this sort of very, lightweight solution. It also comes with its own limitations and challenges, but there's a lot of templates that you are greeted with when you open it, like a lot of default projects that you can use. And as someone who has a background with visual effects software and a lot of node-based stuff like Nuke or Houdini, I think that Lens Studio is a very friendly way to learn how node-based systems work. So with their shader graph or their VFX graph, they're actually very neatly designed because they're so minimal, and yeah, they just explain like data goes in, data comes out, and it's like a very intuitive way of learning those things. I think if you're like interested as a developer in maybe even in just game development as a whole, and you've never done that part, then Lens Studio might be a really fun place to start because it's such a quick, yeah, you can iterate really quickly.
So since you mentioned that it is simple and let's say accessible, high
Yeah,
level, my feeling is that you still give up on something when it comes to, let's say, a more capable engine, right? Imagine like Unity, for example.
yeah,
What are the things that you have to give up or you have to take into account, maybe in terms of expectation for yourself or what you're building when you're building on Lens Studio when compared to maybe another, even not
yeah,
necessarily Unity, maybe like a web-based engine?
yeah. Yeah, comparing it to Unity for a second, I think that like the big difference is, of course, that it is a very, uh, like Lens Studio is like a closed system. It's just like their own proprietary software. So there's no sort of years of people building open source libraries and packages that you can import, or you have to do it with what you have right there. So you can build something from scratch yourself, or maybe there's some sort of asset in the asset library that you can use, but usually it's a very new software, and it's of course not as expensive as Unity is. Um, Compared to a web tool, I'm thinking, yeah, you mean for example something like 3JS or more like a
Yeah,
Swine?
3JS or Play Canvas,
Yeah,
Wonderland Engine, maybe some of this that.
yeah,
So just to get understanding also what can be done, because yes, I can create the small mini game, but I really wanted to have maybe this data layer connected, right? Or
yeah,
maybe I want to have these extra type of interactions.
yeah, yeah.
So in terms of, I would say almost features that I can build or I cannot build in a way.
Yeah, I'm thinking because that is like those examples are possible. You can do networking stuff and you can do like multiplayer stuff and talk with a server. I think the bigger limitation is probably the output. Like where does the result go? Which is they have their own like really cool platforms. They have the spectacles and they have camera kits, so you can put it inside of an app or on the web, or you can just deploy it to Snapchat as a lens. But then it's still Snapchat's engine. Like you're always inside of their engine. I think that is the bigger limitation in that sense. That when you make something, it's always gonna live inside of the Snap system. So you really have to be mindful about like is that gonna be your platform? Like, do you want to go there? That's
And this is was like I had in mind because it was like in the list already. Like when I was thinking and talking to you, is is it risky developing on Lens Studio on Snap? Because it is a closed ecosystem.
Yeah. It's that's a question that, like, with these social media, like, AR platforms, people are always asking. I think exactly a year ago right now, Meta shut down Spark AR, which was their equivalent, kind of. So that was also a bit of a wake up call for the whole industry. Like, oh yeah, this is, this feels flimsy. This feels like it could, you never know. I do think that Snap is really doubling down. Like, you can really see them uh, fully investing in different facets of where Lens Studio goes. So it's not only the spectacles, but it's also their web and app integrations. So a lot of the work that I'm doing in AR is not just for the spectacles, but it's also for, like, custom apps that want to have an AR effect built into their app. So it's not, you never see the Snapchat logo anywhere. It feels like it's native to their app. But under the hood, it is using the Snap engine. So it already feels very, it feels very big, and it feels like it's everywhere already. So in that sense, I feel safe. I feel like there's a lot going on. But yeah, you're still always, like, dependent on this company, which is, and indeed, it's not like an open source project or something. So it doesn't feel like if it would shut down that it would come back in a different way.
I mean,
But
it's also true of open source project in a way that you also rely on the community to keep it alive, and
yeah,
that is also leaves a level of uncertainty. Now,
yeah,
that being said, there is also risk, but also from a professional perspective. Let's say, instance, I'm putting this work out, but this is something that is going to be work or can be published, shared only within that platform. So that might raise some questions to people that want to learn something new, because then it's, oof, now I need to learn Lens Studio. Okay,
yeah,
sure, maybe it's not like learning Unreal when you're Unity, right? Maybe it's such a big gap. But you would still need, let's say, some consideration when looking at what platform you should invest your time, capabilities on. I wanna go more into that side of the professional thing, but before that, since we were still, like, let's say, exhausting the topic of building on Lens Studios and on spectacles, there is another important thing that is the AI layer. In a sense of, for example, using the spectacles to recognize the environment, object, or maybe use an LLM that might be coupled to it to ask questions. Have you experimented with this in some ways? What are the things that you can do? How you can maybe set it up right now? What advice would you give to people that are maybe using the spectacles as a way to experiment of how these new AR display-enabled wearables are going to be capable of?
Yeah. So that's definitely there's a lot of APIs built into Lens Studio that you can make calls to and, like, send back and forth. You can do, like, 3D textured mesh generation for assets, and they're doing this, which I think is funny as a software, as a creation software to do this. Is they added My AI, which is this sort of it creates the whole lens for you. It's a bit silly at the moment. It doesn't, like, it creates funny results, and it's, like, very early days. But basically what it does is it trained on all of, like, created Lens Studio projects in the past. And then when you now open Lens Studio, you can choose to start with a prompt. Like, okay, I want to wear a straw hat and I want a rainbow in the background. And it will do all of those things for you. So it will create scene objects for the rainbow. It will generate the straw hat and import it as a 3D object. It will parent it to your head, and it will create, like, the whole project files for it. So you can later make edits, and it can actually just write code. And so it's like a sort of agent that has full control over all of Lens Studio. And that feels very that feels very sort of futuristic in a sense, because you can see Lens Studio built for you.
So, okay, this was not the question that I was asking, but it's probably an even better answer. So,
Sorry,
in a sense, no, absolutely. So, in a sense, my question was more like, for example, how do you make it that Snap can take a picture, recognize what's in the picture, and so creating a lens that uses AI in a different way, or maybe having a voice command in the lens, for example, to ask, hey, what is this thing?
Yeah.
So that's fine. Going back to what was your answer, right? In a sense, like, this is more like AI used to enable people to create lenses, right?
Yeah.
So there are two layers I was curious about. The fact that you mentioned it's trained on all past lenses.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
That is it's a controversial thing, and it's like I'm not sure on what they trained it. Like I'm not sure if they trained it on all work or only on some work that they did themselves internally. I can't say anything about that. But this is also something that was I think I remember at LensFest, someone during a Q&A also asked this question, like rightfully. They were like a bit like upset about the sort of the AI taking your jobs away quite literally.
I think it's a fair question that should be asked.
Yeah.
I wonder also if sometimes people get upset, but then the moment that you just join in the terms, when you publish a lens, we own the rights to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then at that point, it is different. So it's not like, let's say, Google publishing or let's say training their models on movies or something like this, right? So this is one thing. But here in this case, you are within an ecosystem, and I don't know. So I don't think it would be fair to say this is not right to train on people's, let's say, lenses or projects, because maybe that is part of the thing that you sign in. The moment that you access also tens of millions of people that have also the opportunity to play and download with your lens. So you also get the benefit from it. So I think it boils down to the legal and the notes in the terms to make a call regarding that.
Yeah, that, and also just a bit of perception, like how it, apart from the legal, it does also feel a little bit like it can feel a bit disappointing as a creator to later find out that your work has been used to, now make you redundant as a creator. That's like that's not a great look to be a part of. So I do understand like the frustration with it.
What is then because when you mention like AI basically from a text prompt creating a lens, right? I also strongly believe that people's craft is still like the level of creativity and innovation that is put into it. It just cannot be matched by what a machine does.
Indeed, like right now, definitely, it's still. I don't currently feel threatened by AI. I feel like it is currently, if I use it, it's as a tool and it's like a useful addition to. It just saves me time, but it is of course getting better every day. That is the. Yeah.
So what's your take? Do you see also like AR slop coming up, or?
Yeah. To be honest, I think that is currently what you can do in Lens Studio. Like you could, but it's like, it is funny. It's like a funny sort of system and it works surprisingly well. But indeed, that is something you could build right now. But that goes for any platform and any technology. Everything can be slopified nowadays.
The other day I was listening also to, let's say, a podcast, and I was saying, like, maybe also sometimes I'm putting myself out, and it's also like human slop, because it's halfway baked, like rush through kind of like article or content or whatever, right? So human also produce a lot of slop.
Human slop, yeah.
What is the better slop to have on the internet? I'm not sure that, not to say that I'm in any way endorsing people just pushing content and volume out, because I despise that, and I very much get something made by recently by a human trying something new, rather than something that maybe looks super polished but like super engineered to grab your attention, because that's the only purpose of a lot of this content.
One addition I would like to make to the technical part of like letting AI work for you. It's like it can help a lot with saving time, but I have noticed that when you really get into the details of optimization, which is very necessary on the spectacles, but also on mobile phones, you have to like optimize stuff and do things cleverly. That's where AI really fails at the moment. It doesn't do things the smart way. It does them the way that it works. So it technically works. But then I do find myself rewriting like almost all of the code eventually. It's always, at some point, the AI code is always outdated, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to like revisit this and do it better. And so that's something that also makes me feel like I am adding value to something. It's not just the AI doing something. Like there's a point of me working on this project.
And now going back to what we're discussing, the project, right?
Yeah.
So we were discussing a bit. So the project is the lens, like the prototype or whatever that might be. But then the other project is, let's say, is the packaging, the telling the story of what I built. Like, why you do the second? Why you put so much work up to the level of working first on the video before the project is even finished?
Yeah. So that's a very deliberate choice I make, because I think it's for a couple reasons. One is that it really helps me close that chapter. Like when I've posted about it, I can confidently be like, okay, this project is over now. It's like I don't have to think about it anymore. If I want to do stuff with this project, still, I'm going to need to find a way to do those things in my next project. Like I can then move my ideas to the next. It's kind of like it makes it into a little package. If I don't post about something, it feels like it's always in my mind, like, because I'm still there. It didn't get a finish line in that sense. So posting is a psychological thing for me, but it also helps a great deal with just visibility online. So when I post something, it's like, that's where my future clients come from. They find my work online and then they reach out. So I really also just need to do it. Some of my personal projects I have prioritized over client work, because I felt like this just needs to be posted at some point. I need to take my time to finish it. Otherwise it will be on my desktop or in my files forever. So there have been moments where I really just, took, like, made that a priority as if it was a paid client project. But I was like, this is just my passion thing that needs to be finished now.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting. So how do you kind of like prioritize the two? Because it sounds like there are projects that are just made for the sake of, let's say, getting more clients, posting online, maybe try something cool and a cool idea. And then there is a part of work that is like the real work in a way, right? So how much time do you spend in the two things, and how do you manage to prioritize?
I think it's really 50-50.
Wow.
Half of my time is honestly just unpaid projects, or like in a direct way, like in an indirect way, they do give me my future work. So I do rely on them. If I would now stop doing those projects, I would also stop getting new client work. So I need to do them. But then I'm also trying more lately to do projects that are that I can monetize in some other way, so that I'm like working on something that is kind of a passion project right now, and then maybe I can sell an asset, or I can like get something out there in a different way that it would still be monetizable, that it would be sustainable for me as to sell. But I think it really is 50-50, like my client work and my personal work. And that's kind of by design.
So then let's say when it comes to those projects that you share, right, to indeed use them to attract more clients, are there some recommendation or something that you would suggest to people when just purely creating that video that goes on social media, right?
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other developers that have something cool, but now they need to share it? What can they do?
I honestly just make it fun and believable. If it's too slick or if it's too professional, people are just going to be saying, oh, that's VFX or that's AI, then it's like, then it feels corporate. But if it's like this sort of bit of a goofy experiment and you show the wireframes and how things aren't tracking 100% correctly, then people believe it and they like it. And it's like this sort of, as long as you're having fun with it, I think that's the important part.
And the other thing, I think that is not necessarily that people think it's AI or it's VFX, but it's that promotional. Because if you start seeing something that looks like a promotion, my thing, it's out. Okay, this guy's promoting itself next.
Yeah.
While instead, I think that it's important to say, like, you are part of this thing, you are building it, you are having fun, but it's not for the sake of promoting. And this is clearly easily done by just removing all sorts of text and flashy animations or whatever. And that already frames the whole story, the whole thing in a different way, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another thing that really helps with the sort of that goodwill that you want to create with your community is like, I also almost always share code and assets online just for like, I just put it on my GitHub or I put it somewhere in Lens Studio asset library because it's fun to see other people use it and to learn from it. And yeah, that's appreciated in the long term.
And the other thing also is that is probably some of these projects, it maybe takes weeks, sometimes months, right? So what is also cool to see sometimes is a build up of this thing happening. So it is not just this, but it's like, okay, I tried this. Oh, look, finally got the shader working.
Yeah.
And then there is just the shader there. I mean, it's not like, but at least people also can kind of like connect with the struggle that you're having and then sharing this information through this journey. I think it's something that helps incredibly. And again, I would encourage everybody that does it. It's not just about the final polished project that it's cool to have at the end in a non-promotional way, but I think there can be a lot that you can share even by experiments that have failed, because failure actually looks pretty funny sometimes.
Yeah. It's I think a big part of the appeal of like augmented reality right now, as in videos on social media about it, is also the technical quality of it is not super great yet for obvious reasons. Like it has to render in real time but that's fun. Like, a lot of my projects are very vintage. Like I do like this sort of retro nostalgic things, like PlayStation 1 Hagrid, the Harry Potter game where everything is very low poly. I made that into like a game at my office. So it looks low poly in AR, and that really resonates with people, I think. Not trying to go to high quality and
So, I mean, what a better way to conclude, because you mentioned one thing, is like there are still a lot of limitation right now in what you can build. You can still, as we said, tell amazing stories, right? That gets you clients. And I think that is a fact. But that being said, we are always kind of like thinking, okay, what do we need to have, for example, something that can be used by consumers, right?
Yeah.
Snap is rumoring that this year they might release consumer glasses. We do have the Meta display glasses as well. That, whatever you want to say, it is a layer of augmented reality that is provided on these glasses. So based on your experience, what is the device that we kind of need realistically for consumer in 2026?
Realistically, that's I think then it should be one that excites developers in a way that developers from, for example, if you're an Unreal or Unity game developer and you've never touched VR or AR, then this device should be your sort of wake up call. This should be like that moment. So it should be one that you can very quickly send something to, very very quick turnaround, very quick iterations. That's what I'm thinking with like, that's what the spectacles are for me. They're like, you just plug them in with USB, you just send something, and within 3 seconds you're playing in real time while your Lens Studio is open.
This is such an interesting answer, Max. I mean, honestly, because everybody's saying, oh, we need glasses, we need this feature, we need this feature, we need this feature. And we think about the consumers buying them. But maybe what we need, you just wouldn't need consumer, because consumer don't know anything in a way, in a good way, right? But the point is, like, if we can get finally the developers excited to build on it, that is maybe the moment that this thing is gonna have something valuable to do in it.
We're still finding out the use cases and the utility for it. We're still finding out the path for it. So indeed, we just need to have the developers on it first. Get the content.
Awesome. Max, look, my mission, I'm going to make it this year the mission to try to give the stage to more developers that are building cool apps like yours. So also, if anybody listening this have something cool to share, like some of the work Max has done or something else that they can actually teach to others, right? Because that's the whole purpose. I hope that people have learned something today. And so if you got projects like prototypes or something to build, I'm pretty sure, Max, you sounds like you're up for it. I'm going to leave, of course, your contact in the episode description. And Max, thank you very much. It was a very great conversation. I learned a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube.
It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers, pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.